Hello again everyone, and welcome back to Otherworldly Encounters, where you can submit your NDE, OBE, spiritual or paranormal story to my email address noted here, and in the description section of this channel as well. No need to use your real name, you can submit anonymously and I will do my best to create a video with your story. Today's story comes from Alyssa, who became ill after eating contaminated food. She died and had a most unusual experience in a world beyond our understanding, and here is her story. It was April of 1996. I was supposed to take a trip to see a friend who lived in Colorado, but that day I became sick after eating what I found out later to be contaminated ravioli. I was vomiting profusely and eventually became weak and lightheaded, and then confusion set in. I tried drinking something, but it would immediately come back up. I told my husband that I thought I needed to go to the emergency room. When we arrived, the waiting room was packed, and I was not taken right away. About a half hour later, I felt like I was going to pass out. My husband alerted the nurse, and then I was taken into the emergency room and saw the doctor. He put me on IV fluids and wanted to admit me, but before that could happen, I had a seizure, and then left my body. I was on the ceiling, and saw the medical staff scurrying around, and hovering over what appeared to be my body. I thought this could not be happening. One minute I was dizzy, and the next, I was on the ceiling. I watched for a while, and then floated right through the roof, and then around the top of the hospital. Suddenly I was pulled into what looked like a room with many windows. It had rows of seats, like you would see on a bus. I thought I was alone in this room, but then I heard people talking behind me. I turned around and the seats were filled, but the rows in front of me were empty. This room was moving, and now I had the impression that I was on a train. I had no idea where it was going, so I turned around and asked the people sitting behind me, but no one even looked up to acknowledge me. The area with the empty row of seats in front of me was dimly lit, and I was almost certain that no one was there. This train-like vehicle eventually slowed down, then moved into a dark tunnel, but I could still see what was going on in what I will call the train car. The train car eventually came to a stop, and I was not sure what to do, when all of a sudden I saw someone walking toward me. When they got closer, I could see that this was my aunt, who had passed away 2 years ago. She looked at me and then said, "Where do we go now?" I said, "Aunt Josie, am I dead?" She said we had decided to visit a city that she was not familiar with, and I had agreed to show her around. Then she turned and walked back from where she came from, and disappeared into the darkness. I started floating upward again, and this time, I was over what looked like a big city. I was very confused but not terribly frightened. For some reason, I felt safe, and decided just to take it all in, because at that point, I believed that I had died. I floated over the city, and then into another room, which was completely bare, except for what looked like a closet. I opened the closet door and saw my overnight bag, but it was empty. I heard a man's voice, so I turned around, and it was Steve, a man I had dated 5 years earlier. We were going to get married, but he died in a motorcycle accident. I said, "Steve, what is going on?" But all he said was, "You need to get dressed for the party." I didn't know what he meant by this, but since he said it was a party, I assumed I needed to dress up. I told him all I had to wear was what was on me, which was a sweatshirt and jeans. Everything went dark, and I could feel myself floating once again. Then I heard people talking, and it was as if someone turned up the lights, like the kind that are on a dimmer switch. There were people dressed nicely, and they were hovering around a table, and it was covered with all sorts of hors d'oeuvres. I felt very uncomfortable, thinking I was not dressed appropriately for the occasion, even though I knew I was dead. But when I looked down at myself, I saw that I was wearing a pair of long silky gold pants and a black silk top. I looked across the table, and there was a woman wearing the same outfit. No one seemed to notice me, and I wondered who these people were. I didn't like the vibes, and I was uncomfortable, and wanted to get out of there. When I tried to think myself out of there, I found that I couldn't do that. I was able to move around earlier, using my thoughts, but this time it didn't work. I always hated fancy cocktail parties, and I didn't like dressing up for them either. Now I was stuck at one, and I started to think that this was not a good situation. I could not communicate with anyone, and I feared I would be at this cocktail party for all of eternity. I looked around for a way to escape, but there were no doors or windows. I started to panic, so I called out saying, "Please someone get me out of here," but no one was listening to me, so I eventually called for Jesus, and when I did, a door appeared. I opened it, and there was a man standing there. He was very tall, and spoke to me in a deep voice. He asked if I enjoyed the party. I had a feeling that he knew I did not like cocktail parties, and that he was taunting me. I wondered why this man, who I thought might be Jesus, was asking me this question. I responded through telepathy, saying, "You know how I feel about cocktail parties," and then he laughed and asked me to look down. I did as he said, and I was back in my jeans and sweatshirt, and I felt so comfortable once again. Then he said, "Go back and make people feel comfortable," and then I was back in my body. The doctor had revived me, and I eventually recovered, and went on to become a clinical psychologist. I now work with people who suffer from anxiety, depression, and low self-esteem, and love helping them feel better about themselves. Without this experience, I doubt I would have pursued this profession. I believe Jesus was the man in the doorway, who sent me back to complete my mission in life. Thank you for allowing me to share my experience with your listeners. What did you think of Alyssa's story? Let me know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed her story, please give it a like and subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you can receive a notification when I release a new video. Thank you for watching, and I hope you will come back and visit again soon.